Hey everybody. Um, so I decided this time that instead of creating a video, I would just go live and talk to you directly. I can't imagine anybody seeing this live, so there won't be any chat or anything funny like that. But it's just easier than creating a video. I'm not going to pretend like I go in there and edit these things and make it all professional for you guys. These videos are purely educational and just for your consumption. And I think there's something more traditional about bringing information to you directly and not editing it, not changing it, not redoing it 5 times. You're just getting the information off the top of my head, and I feel like there's truth in that. So the topic today is going to be about NEM3 and switching from NEM2 to NEM3 back in April. If you don't know what I'm talking about, here in California, we had net metering for several years now, and the utilities are always trying to make more money. So the reason solar is so beneficial in California, it's such a big deal, and why there's so many companies doing it, is because the utilities here, we're talking about there's only three. So we have SDG&E, that's San Diego. We have Edison, Southern California Edison specifically, which is a great part of the state. And then PG&E, so Pacific Gas and Electric, which is mostly Northern California, as it were, and part of Central California. Those three utilities make crazy money here because it is absolutely a monopoly. It's not a secret. And they've been complaining lately that there's too many people going solar and they aren't making enough money as they used to. And the joke of that is that the reason they're not making as much money is because they didn't invest in their own infrastructure. So instead of preserving the nukes that they had in place or building out their own solar fields and things of that nature, devices that would have created lower price power for them here locally in California when they had the opportunity, they took the money and ran. They made crazy profits over the last 20 years. And now they have an old withering system that they're having to update. They have transistors that are up on poles that are 100 years old. I mean, and that's not an exaggeration. They're 100 years old, and they're supposed to be getting replaced every 10 or 20 years. And their policy is not to replace any of this stuff until it literally blows up and causes a fire. They don't plan on it causing a fire, but this is California. We're a desert. And so there's a lot of dried sticks out there. And if it's, not raining on a regular basis, which we've gotten a lot of rain this last year, thankfully, it's dry out there and it causes fires. And you guys have seen the utilities cause several fires over the last couple of years. Let me tell you, that's preventable. If they were replacing these transistors and things like they were supposed to, and keeping the grid up to date like they were supposed to, like they agreed to, then we wouldn't have had this great loss of life. And they throw their hands in the air and they act like there's nothing that could be done. It's a great tragedy. But anybody who looks into it at all knows that that's a joke. I'm not here to get into all that, but that's a big part of why we had to switch. So in the good old days, we had regular net metering here in California, and the way that worked was when your system, your solar system, or wind system, or whatever you had, when you created power and you were on the utilities grid, you would create. We track it by hours, so it's a kilowatt hour, as it were, and that kilowatt hour is metered. And in the old days, you would buy power from the grid, buy kilowatt hour that your system needed. And the meter guy would come by and see how many kilowatt hours you bought that month. And then you'd get a bill. Then we got net metering, where you became a two-way street instead of a one-way street. You can make your own power now. You could have a solar system. And they used to try to block us in the old days where they said you could only create a system that was 70% of the power that you used. And that was 10 or 15 years ago. And then it was 90% of the power or 100% of the power. Now you can go up to 200%. So you can say, in the future, I'm planning on needing more power. I'm going to get an electric car, something to that effect. So the CPUC, again, is regulated by the government, big brother telling you what to do, will allow you to go up to 200% of your existing usage. So again, in the old days, your system would create power. And during the day, let's just keep it, one day at a time. So during the day, you'd create 130% of the power that you needed. So you might create 10 kilowatt hours and your family would only use 7 kilowatt hours while the sun was up. That extra 3 kilowatt hours that you produce would go onto the grid. And then at night, when solar panels don't work, you would pull from the grid and you'd use your banked hours first. So if you didn't go over those 3 kilowatt hours extra that you produced, then it would be a net. You didn't know them anything. They didn't know you anything. You paid a small connection fee to use their grid every month, which was $7 to $10. And that's probably a fair amount per household. And you think about how many households there are out there, you're not costing them more than $10 to use their grid and do the net metering. So that was a fair deal. Um, it was bigger than that in terms of how it worked on an annual basis. So what we would do as professionals, if we did our job correctly, is we would build a system out that was 100 and say 5 to 10% of what your usage was. And in the spring and in the fall, when we didn't use our air conditioning as much, we weren't in the house as much, maybe we weren't using as much electricity, and the days aren't quite as long or getting longer, right, in the spring, then you would create a lot more power than you needed, and those would get banked onto their grid. And then in the summer, when you were using a lot more power, everybody sees their bills go up usually in the summer, especially down here in Southern California where we use air conditioning more. Then you would pull from them. And so I used to always tell my customers, in the top right hand corner of your bill, because here in Orange County, I see a lot of Edison. So that's where it is. You'll see in, March, April, May, even into June, you're going to have a credit. So it'll say $200, $300, $400 negative. So if you close your account right then, they'd have to cut you a check, right? You go into summer, and you crank your AC the whole time, then that's going to eat away at that. So your system's not going to create enough power for you, and you're going to use those banked kilowatt hours, and it's going to go back to zero. And if we do our jobs correctly, again, at the end of the year, Edison or PG&E or SDG&E might owe you $50 or $100 if we did our job correctly. It's like taxes. You don't want to owe them too much. You don't want them to owe you too much, right? You don't want to give them a free loan, right? You don't want to create power for them. You don't want to waste your money. But at the same time, you don't want to have to buy at their exorbitant rates, especially the last couple of years. We used to pay 10 cents per kilowatt hour or 15 cents per kilowatt hour. And now we're paying 50 and 60 and 70 cents per kilowatt hour. And I'll tell you why that matters. Because in April here in California, actually at the end of last year, in October, November, they passed a law or ruling. Wasn't even a law. It wasn't voted on by anybody. Nobody had any control over this, but the utilities and the CPUC. And they said in April of this year, we're going to switch to a new model. And they tried presenting it as though it was beneficial to everybody involved. But the reality is it was just a way for the utilities to make more money, their shareholders to make more money, these energy companies to make more money. Which again is silly, because if you look at the most profitable companies in the world, it's pharmaceuticals and energy. Energy is right up there all the time. So tell me these guys aren't already making enough money. Look how much Sempra makes, for instance, or PG&E. What a joke. So these companies say they're not making enough money, and that we in solar are not doing our fair share. We're not pulling our weight. And they would even go to the other people in the community who don't have solar and say, hey, these guys are costing you money. And you're starting to see it in the gas stations too. People aren't paying their gas taxes, right? They're not putting that in because they have electric cars. They're not buying gas. They're not paying the gas taxes. And now there's a shortage of money of the state's finances. So it's the electric car buyer's fault that they're not paying the taxes, right? It's the person that has solar's fault that these utilities are not making enough money for their shareholders, and therefore cannot reinvest in their grid, or have to raise rates to some absorbent amount, 50, 60, 70 cents per kilowatt hour. And to give you an idea, our neighboring states, so Utah, Nevada, Arizona, they pay 7 cents per kilowatt hour, 8 cents per kilowatt hour. So here in California, we're paying 10 times what they're paying. And again, it's purely because they did not invest in their own grid. They did not invest in their company the way they should have locally, because they knew they weren't going to have to. They knew they could continue to just pay themselves huge bonuses and walk away. And so now we're in the world of NEM3, and people asked, is it going to kill solar? Is it going to take the industry by storm? Is it going to go away? Are people not going to buy? And I didn't know the answer. In fact, I was so unsure at the time. I didn't want to continue selling projects that weren't going to be in NEM2 until I was really sure what it was going to look like, because I didn't feel comfortable telling people that were going to be in NEM3 what it was going to look like. I wasn't comfortable selling them a system and quoting them a price and telling them the grids, it's going to cost you this much. You're going to need this much power to make sure that you don't get a bill. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to build out systems that weren't going to ultimately cost customers more than what they were already spending with their utility. And that's the whole point in doing this. So I took 2 months off. I didn't sell any jobs. My company, Bash Energy, sold 0 jobs for 2 months, just to make sure that we understood it completely before we sold any jobs. And what I found was, when everything transitioned and we started seeing the numbers and they started giving us the information and we started bidding jobs again, is that solar's not going anywhere. And the reason is because we were already so much cheaper that even after the transition, and I'll explain what the transition is here in a second, we're still significantly less expensive than the utilities. Huge surprise. Didn't take any time at all. So let me tell you what changed. So I was telling you in the old days, we would create a kilowatt hour and we'd use it. If we created two and only used one, you would bank one on their grid and then you'd get it back when you needed it. It was a 1-to-1. So there's no cost fluctuation. In NEM3, you're now selling that kilowatt hour and then buying a different kilowatt hour when you need it, whether it's that same night or in the summer, right? Now, if it were fair, they would be paying you maybe not the same, but close to what they're selling it for, right? Anybody who's in business, what's your profit margin like? So, for those of you who own businesses or understand finance or economics, what's your profit margin like? What do you have to buy a product for? And what do you have to sell it for to be a profitable company? I'm not saying make it free anymore. Sure, you want to buy it from us wholesale and sell it to my neighbor? Go ahead. What is your profit margin like? Because I can tell you that for a company like mine, we make maybe 5% on what we sell a project for. Maybe 5% of that is net profit, if that. Sometimes it's a lot less. Sometimes we don't make money at all, depending on how we bid the job. Unfortunately, it happens. They are charging upwards of 50, 60, 70 cents per kilowatt hour, like we discussed. They're paying 2 cents, 3 cents, 4 cents per kilowatt hour. So when I say they're making a 10x profit or 20x profit, I'm being accurate. That's not me. I'm not trying to act like it's something that it's not. I'm not trying to say that it's that it's insane when really it's not. It's understandable. No, they're making 10x, 20x, 20 times what they're paying, and all they're doing is taking an extra kilowatt hour from a solar customer, putting it up on the wire, and it's being bought by the neighbor, and it's being again bought by them at 2 cents, 3 cents per kilowatt hour, and being sold to the neighbor at 55 cents per kilowatt hour. And the CPUC thought that was totally fair. So now we're having to figure out how to make sure that it's the same game. We want to make sure that our customers are not having to buy anything from the utilities, from Edison, from PG&E, from SDG&E. You're not buying anything anymore. So there's a couple ways that we've done this. We can add batteries. And so we take away the grid entirely. You still have to be connected, but I'm not putting my kilowatt hours up on your grid anymore. Now I'm putting it in a battery in my garage, safely stored away. And you can have customers who have, 2 and 3 batteries, and it's still the return on investment is, 10 years. And these systems last for 30 and 40 years sometimes. So you're making your money back in, 25% of the time. There isn't another return on investment that you can find in terms of, these things are worth more than your home in terms of growth. So find me something that pays itself off in 8 years and that you get 40 years of benefit out of, and I'll start selling those instead. So again, our customers are getting batteries. Sometimes they're getting several batteries and it's worth it. They're paying in cash and the return on investment's worth it. Some of our customers are still doing financing, though it's less often than it was before. Cash has gotten more expensive, so financing has gotten more expensive. Sometimes people are having to pay 8 and 9% to borrow the money that they need for solar. Let me tell you, it's still well worth it. So even if I finance a system that's going to last 40 years and I finance it for 25 years, your payment that you were already going to be making to one of the utilities is still with 3 full batteries is still less per month than you were going to spend with the utilities. So I can take you from and this isn't a sales pitch. You can go to any solar company that you find comfortable, and they should all be able to do this for you. So if you go to a solar company that you think is, really good at what they do, and they tell you your bill's going to go up by 25% to get solar, please get some more estimates because they should still be less expensive than what you're paying now on average annually. So your bill's going to come down every month. And the benefit, just like it always was, is, next year when the utilities go up by 15%, which they will, they have the last 5 years, they will the next 5 years, and down the road, they have no plans to create power here in California. They're not bringing back nukes. They don't have solar fields going in. They can't do natural gas. They can't do coal. You tell me what the answer is, because it looks like, there isn't one, right? So 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, those of you that are paying $200 per month currently, you're going to be paying $300 in 3 years. You're going to be paying $500 in 6 years, and you're going to be paying $1,000 a month in 10 or 11 years. So those people that we're talking about that are paying 200 to the utility, when they switch to solar today, maybe it's the same. Maybe I take you from $200 at Edison, and you're going to pay $200 for the financing to get the solar system involved. That Edison bill is going to come down to nothing, and that financing is going to be the same. So $200 on average, right? Your payment next year is still going to be $200. Your payment in 3 years is going to be $200. It's a 25-year term usually. Sometimes people do 20. You can do 10 if you want to, whatever. You can get your own financing. I don't care. You pay it in cash. You can do it through your bank, however you want to do it. We don't make any money on the financing. Nobody, however you want to finance your system is fine. But we can help you get financed at 25 years. Your payment is the same or less. And the utility company next year is going to be $100 more, and your payment's going to be the same. The utility company in 5 years is going to be 5x what it is now, and your payment's going to be the same. So solar, just like property, just like the stock market, the trick is going to be getting in early, getting in often. You're not going to wait for rates to come down. The costs aren't going to come down. They've only gone up. The technology is not getting better. We've sort of tabled off in terms of what we can offer. The systems look great. They are, in terms of what you're getting in technology, less expensive than they've ever been. And NEM 3 closed the gap for sure. I mean, I had customers in the past in NEM 2 where it was half. I mean, I have a customer down in San Diego that is, getting pushed through the process right now that was thankfully in NEM 2, and he was paying $450 a month on average. And now his bill is, $285, and it's going to be that for the next 25 years. He's financed. So his bill would have, he'd be at $700-800 in a couple of years. He's still going to be inside $300 every month. And then once it gets paid off, he owns it. So when you get to year 25, that payment goes to zero. You're still paying Edison zero, and you're getting another 10 or 15 years probably out of that system where it's going to work at a pretty high functioning rate and not have to pay anything into the system. So solar is still the way to go. It hasn't changed at all. Unfortunately, the only downside is if you waited and you didn't have it yet, you're not getting as good of a deal, right? You could have been paying half, and now you're going to be paying maybe 85%, still less. You'd still do it. You're still paying less. You still need the power. There isn't a third option. So you might as well go with the less expensive option. You might as well go with the investment that makes sense long-term and get out from under Edison, get out from under the utility. Even if you're selling next year, the value of the home goes up, the cost of the system, as long as you own it. We can get into PPAs and leases and stuff like that. And I'll save that for a different video. They're still beneficial in a different way. They're a good option for some people. I prefer to do a purchase for most 85% of my customers. But whatever route you choose, it's a better option than what you're doing now. And there isn't a scenario, even if you're going to sell your home, you're going to move in 6 months or a year or 2 years or 5 years, it's still a better deal. If you're going to be there forever, it's still a better deal. If you don't know how much power you're going to need in a couple of years because you're afraid something might change, it's still a better deal to get it done now and make adjustments down the road if you have to. Even in those rare, strange situations where you might end up paying a little bit more for solar now, maybe it's an extra 10 or 15 bucks a month or something like that. Still, get bids to make sure that you're not just being, oversold, right? Make sure you're getting a good deal. Always get 2 or 3 bids, even if I don't care who you're working with. Always get 2 or 3 bids from everybody. Always, it's a great thing to do. But even if you're paying a little bit more, in a couple of years, you're going to be inside of what the utility is, and it's going to keep going in that direction always. So the only people who got hurt were people that didn't get in early enough, and so get in now, get it taken care of. Call us and have us out. Call whomever it is you're comfortable with. And if you already have solar, or you have questions about solar, if you just want to know more or anything like that, give us a call. Let me know. Leave a comment down below, and we'd love to get started and help you out. So go ahead and wrap up the video there. I was right that nobody jumped on, which is fine. We'll get famous later. NEM 3 is still great. NEM 2 was awesome, but the industry hasn't changed. It's going to keep going in this direction, and better to get in early than get in late or not get in at all. All right, thanks guys. I'll see you in the next one.